Welcome back for another live tutorial. Today we are going to be learning how to draw water droplets and create this water effect, this text water effect in Procreate. It's really a really cool effect. It's actually fairly simple to achieve once you kind of know how it works, but I'm excited to show you how to do it today. So for this tutorial, I'm going to be using brushes from my Wash and Dry Watercolor Toolkit. I have some really cool wash brushes that create kind of like a watercolor washy texture. And then the brush that I'm going to be using to do the actual water droplets is really nice. It has kind of a soft edge and then a little bit more of a hard edge, and it's going to be perfect for doing the type of shading that we're going to do today. All right, so I wanted to mention that this tutorial is a part of the Making Art Everyday Challenge. It's a drawing challenge that I've been running for almost 3 years now. We have daily drawing prompts and challenges and always have a theme every month. And this month's theme is elements, and meaning like we're gonna be exploring different elements you might find in the world, like water, fire, earth, kind of like that. This week has been water. And really what we're focusing on is rendering. And what rendering means is it's a process of like adding shading and color and value and things like that to make something appear to be real, even though our screen is just a two-dimensional surface or a piece of paper is two-dimensional. You can see these two cups. This one has a bit more rendering, and like you feel like you could hold it in your hand and it looks like glass because it's shiny and the water is see-through. And this one, you can see that it's a glass of water, but this one just feels more real to your brain. So that's what rendering does. And today I'm going to be showing you how to do a water droplet. It looks kind of real, but it's still kind of got a nice stylized quality. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and draw. I'm gonna go ahead and open up Procreate. And I just wanted to mention, you guys, Jeff is here as always manning the chat. So if you have any questions, feel free to throw them out if it's about what I'm doing. And if you have any like general questions, we'll do a Q&A at the end and I will answer those kind of general questions. So feel free to ask questions. That's the big benefit of doing this live. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and create a new canvas. I'm gonna go up to the plus sign here, and I'm gonna use my favorite size, which I use a lot. It's 3800 by 2800 pixels, and I have a canvas template for that. So I'm gonna go ahead and open that. Again, it's 3800 by 2800 pixels. All right, so I'm just gonna start by putting down a background for my water droplet to be on. We're gonna start by drawing just a simple water droplet so I can show you kind of what the concepts are here that you're gonna be learning about how to draw these like water droplet effects. So I'm gonna go up to my brushes and I'm using the Wash and Dry Watercolor Toolkit, which comes in 3 sets. There's the wash set, which has all these kind of wash kind of brushes. There's dry, which is kind of has these dry brush effects. And then we have the tools. We're gonna start in the wash set. And the brush that I'm going to start with is called Stone Wash. So again, it's in the wash set for the Wash and Dry Watercolor Toolkit. It's a mouthful. And the brush is Stone Wash. And I'm going to go to my colors, and I'm just going to choose like a nice blue, you know, fairly light, but not like completely saturated. So it's got a little bit of darkness in it. And then I'm just going to paint. My brush size is pretty big right now. And I'm just gonna paint, I'm not lifting my brush, I'm just kind of painting a splotch on the canvas. And then I'm gonna lift up my pencil and I'm gonna do it again. And the way that these brushes work is like, the more that you layer them, kind of the deeper and like it'll keep getting darker if I go. And you get these nice color effects that are like multi-tonal, and it's really fun. So that's kind of how this brush works. So I just did 2 layers. Like you can do another one if you want, you know, depending on how dark you want it to be. All right, so that's our background, very simple, just kind of this nice wash effect. And now we're gonna create a new layer to start drawing our water droplet. So I'm gonna go up to the layers panel and I'm gonna go ahead and create a new layer. And then I'm gonna go over to my brushes and I'm going to go to the Wash and Dry Tools. So again, there's 3 sets in this set. Wash and Dry Tools is the one that I'm going to now. And these have a lot of brushes that let you draw shapes and things like that. They have specific kind of purposes, but the one that I'm going to use is the Wet Edge Shaper. And the shaper brushes are for drawing shapes, but in this case, we're going to use it kind of to paint with because of the nice qualities that it has. So Wet Edge Shaper, okay? And then finally, we're going to choose a color, and we're going to choose actually just black. So go ahead and choose black. All right. And so now we're going to draw the shape of our water droplet. For the brush size, I've got it like, 3/4 of the way up, and I'm just going to draw very lightly. Here, let me do that one more time. Just kind of a drop shape. It's kind of like an irregular oval, like very thin kind of outline like that. Okay, so that's kind of the shape of our droplet. And then I'm going to go ahead and actually create a new layer now. So we're going to be using a lot of different layers to kind of create the different elements of the water droplet. So I'm going up to the layers and I'm going to create a new layer. And so what I would recommend is looking at a reference photo of a water droplet, because you'll start to see these qualities that I'm going to be pointing out to you. We're going to be imagining that the light is coming in from this direction, that way. And so in a water droplet, the way that the light kind of goes into the droplet is it'll hit over here and then create a shadow here, and then this part will be dark. So the water is kind of creating a shadow here and then also here, and because it's transparent, the light appears here. So it's a little confusing. It's like a little bit different than when you normally shade something, but follow along and you'll see. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make my brush size a little bit bigger. And I'm just very lightly kind of coming in and then kind of making a shadow right there. And I want this shadow to be darker, closer to the edge. And if you aren't getting like very smooth, like a gradient in your shading, I'll show you what you can do to fix that. I'm going to do that one more time. It's always a little awkward doing it at an angle like this with the phones in front of me. So, and then if I go a little lighter, I can draw it like a little bit lighter right there. Okay. And so my shading isn't super smooth, so I'm going to show you a cool trick that you can do to kind of smooth it out. If you go to the adjustments right here, it's this little magic wand, and you go to Gaussian blur right there. Then you want to go to pencil, not layer. When you do it with me, we usually go to layer, but we're actually going to choose pencil. And this will allow me to selectively blur parts of my artwork. So I'm going to hit pencil, and then you'll see that the paintbrush will have little sparkles right there, and you can choose whatever brush you want to do this applying of the blur, but we're just going to use the same brush. And then you can just kind of paint on the blur effect. It works a little bit better than smudge, depending on the brush that you're using, so you can kind of blur it a little bit like that. Okay? Let me know if you guys are having questions. I'm happy to answer them, or if you need me to repeat something, I can do that as well. All right, so I'm just going to tap to get out of that. And so now we've got this shadow. So now we're going to work on the highlight. So the highlight's going to be over here. So we're going to go ahead and create a new layer. So now we've got the outline, we've got this first shadow, and now we have a new layer for the highlight. We're going to switch over to white. I like to use the double tap. If you double tap close to white, it'll snap to pure white in this color disc. And so now, because of the way this brush works, it's kind of softer. I can make it softer on this edge and like a little bit harder on that edge. So I'm just going to flip my whole canvas this way. It's a little bit easier to do it that way. And now I'm going to paint in some white. So I'm doing very lightly to kind of fade it out over here. And then I'll come back again and make it darker here with another brush stroke to make, ultimately you want like wherever the light comes in and hits this side, that'll be the brightest spot.
So which brush are we using from the wash and dry set right now?
Good question. We're using the Wet Edge Shaper, and then we're pretty much going to use this brush for the entire thing. Wet Edge Shaper. The only different brush we used was for the background. Okay. And again, if you need to blur it, oh, actually, I'll come back to that. So when you're making this highlight, you want to also be sure you're leaving some of the area not white. You don't want the white to go like all the way over here. You want it to have some transparency so you look like it looks like you're seeing through the water. I'm going to blur this just a little bit. So I'm going to the adjustments menu, Gaussian blur, pencil, and then I can just blur that just a little bit. Doesn't have to be perfect. Okay. All right, so you might be starting to see the effect already. There's a couple more things we need to do to really sell it, and that is like a specular highlight here, which is a really sharp highlight, and then the shadow over here. So I'm gonna go ahead and create a new layer for this, for the sharp specular highlight. And I'm gonna use the same brush. I'm gonna take the brush size down a little bit so that I can get like nice, sharp. I can press a little bit heavier with this brush. If it's light, it'll be kind of opaque. Maybe a little smaller than that. Yeah, so I can get nice sharp lines if I make the brush size a little bit smaller. Let me undo all those. And then just, you could do just a little swoopy mark like that. You could do, this is indicating like the light source. You could do couple if you want. We don't know what the light source actually looks like, so we're just kind of imagining like if there's two lights hitting it, it might look like that. However you want to do it. You can make this up because it's made up. It's not real. So I'll just do a little swoopy like that. And then the last bit is to do the shadow over here. So I'm going to go over to my layers and I'm going to put a layer underneath all the other layers. So I'm going to tap on the bottommost layer and then just hit plus. So this new layer is below all these other layers. And again, you don't have to put everything on separate layers. I think it's just a little bit easier when we're learning to see the different parts. Okay, so we've got our new layer. And I'm going to go back to black. And now I'm going to go bigger with my brush size. And I'm going to paint in the shadow that if this was a 3D, it'd be the shadow that it's casting. If it was like a 3D droplet, this is the shadow that it's casting. So let me see here. So I'm gonna kind of go all the way around the sides and I'm gonna do it a little softer here. I'll probably use my blur to kind of fix that a little bit, but I want it to be really dark, close to the droplet, and then it to kind of like fade out a little bit. Okay. So that looks a little bit messy, but I can fix that with the blur. So adjustments, Gaussian blur, pencil, and then I can just kind of blur it a little bit. There we go. And you can always use, oops, let me get out of there. You can always use the eraser tool with the same brush to kind of clean it up if you need to. And I'm using really light pressure to do this, so. Okay, all right, cool. So we're really starting to see that effect. This is pretty much done. There's one other detail that you can do, which is to add a little like kind of reflection in this shadow. I don't always do this, but you can if you want, where it's just like the light's kind of like coming out. So I'm just really lightly, sorry, what I did was create a new layer just so I could separate that. It's right above the shadow. And then it's just like a little bit of light that kind of spills out. You can blur it if you want. I don't use the blur as much when we do the text, like the lettering, just because we're working at smaller sizes. So it's like kind of the light kind of coming out that way. And then the last thing that I do, because this is like very contrasty, like the blacks are really black, is you can go through and just go to the opacity, which is you tap on this little N. So this is the shadow layer. We'll tap on it, the cast shadow. And you can like adjust it to make it like less black. That's what I'm doing to all the layers that have black. I'm just kind of like adjusting them to make them a little more transparent. And I think that kind of sells the effect a little bit. I'm gonna erase a little bit right here. You want to still see this like black outline, but I don't want to paint white over it completely. So there you go. So there is a water droplet. And so the things you want to retain from this is like where the shadows are, which are kind of on this edge where the light is coming in, and then drop shadow this way. And then the highlights, which are, there's kind of like a graduated highlight here, and then this sharp highlight there. And then if you want, you can do this highlight too. Okay, so let that all sink into your brain, and I'm gonna show you how to do that cool water effect, like the text water effect next, okay? Before we continue, I'm just gonna check in to see if you guys have any questions.
That was really cool. We had someone over on Instagram just saying how awesome and effective what you were just showing is. Tomas over on YouTube was just saying incredible tutorial, Lisa.
Thanks. Thank you, guys.
And the Golden Paw was just saying it's absolutely how amazing you are. You're the best art teacher, live streamer on the entire planet.
Aw, you guys make me feel good. I need that. Thanks. Cool. So yeah, so what I want to teach you guys, it's not really about like, yay, this is an art of water droplet, you know, like that's not, you're probably not going to print this out and hang it on your wall. It's more about like learning the concepts of how to render water drops that are sitting on a surface, so that you can use it if you like had a picture, like you know, you're drawing a picture of somebody that they spilled water, and you could like show how the water looks like dropped everywhere. And it's stuff that you can use for other things that you're drawing. And I forgot, there's one more thing I wanted to show you with this, which is kind of cool. One more little effect. So I'm going to actually create another layer.
And real quick, before you get too far, would you always use watercolor brushes for this?
You don't have to. Like the brushes that you use will just kind of indicate the style that you're going for. You can do this with like more painterly style brushes. You can do it'll just kind of affect the way that the style of your art looks. As long as you get like a softer edge shadow here and here and here, and then a like hard highlight here. So it's all about these concepts. You can use other brushes as long as you can achieve these same like graduated shading and like these hard shadows. So you don't have to. I just like the way it looks. And I love the way this brush performs when doing this. So real quick, I just wanted to show you one more cool thing. If a way you can kind of manipulate the background a little bit. So I'm going to go up to my layers. I'm going to create a layer right above my background, just so we can show you this. And then I'm just going to grab like a darker blue, like that. And then I'm going to grab a different brush. I think I'll use the dry edge shaper. It doesn't really matter at this point. You don't have to follow along and do this if you don't want. So this is kind of cool. I'm just drawing a few lines behind it. And this really shows like, I don't know, it really lets you see the transparency of the water droplet and how the light looks on it. I think it's super cool. But in reality, the water will distort whatever it's on. So a way that you can illustrate that is like this. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my selection tool, and I'm just going to draw like around the edge there. So I make a selection of within there. And then I'm going to go to my adjustments menu, and I'm going to go to liquify, and I'm going to go to expand. And expand just kind of makes things bloat, like they expand. So if I just like tap and hold there, it'll kind of make this warped effect. And now, so I'm going to do that one more time so you can see it. So you might have to adjust the size of your brush and the pressure. So I'm just kind of like making that balloon up a little bit. And so now you can kind of like imagine that the water is distorting what's underneath it. It's pretty cool. All right, so let's move on and do our wet text effect. So I'm just gonna go ahead and create a new document now. Let's go up to Gallery. And I'm just gonna create another new canvas. So I'm gonna tap the plus sign, and I'm gonna use the same size, 3800 by 2800 pixels. All right, and so we're gonna basically repeat the same process, but we're gonna do it with some text. So the first thing I'm gonna do is do a background color. You can do whatever color you want for the background. I just like blue because it makes me think of water. And let's go to the wash set and get that stone wash brush. You can really use whatever you want for the background. Again, I love this kind of watercolor effect, how it looks. So I'm just doing about like 3 oops, I'll do it again. Doing like 3 passes with this brush to kind of get those nice values and color, and it looks really cool. Okay, and then I'm gonna go ahead and create a new layer. I'm gonna get like a darker version of that same color. It doesn't really matter what color you're using right now. And I'm gonna go to the Wash and Dry tools, and I'm gonna select my glaze edge shaper again. I think this one will work for that. And I'm just gonna write the word that I wanna do. I'm gonna do the word wet. You can do any word you want, but maybe stick to a short word while you're learning so it's not like too overwhelming. Okay, I'm gonna scooch that over a little bit. Okay, so I've got the word wet, and this is really just like a template for me to draw my water droplet words on. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm going to go to the layers. I'm gonna go to the little N here, and I'm gonna turn down the opacity. So it's about, I don't know, 28% or so. And this is, again, just a guide. So I'm gonna go ahead and create a new layer now. And I'm gonna switch to black. All right, so now we're gonna draw the outline of this text in droplet form. So we don't wanna trace it exactly. We kind of want, like if you imagine what a water would look like, it kind of like, it doesn't have any sharp edges or anything like that. There's like kind of blobby, looks a little blobby and irregular. So that's what we're trying to do here. So I'll show you that. So I'm gonna go ahead and make my brush a little bigger. And again, with a light touch, I'm just kind of making it a little blobby. And see here, I didn't make like a point. I made it kind of rounded there. And actually I'm gonna make it more blobby than that. You kind of make it wiggly. You just don't want any like sharp edges or anything really straight. And you kind of just go around and something like that. Oops. Fill that in. Okay, so there's the W. I'm gonna do the E now, and I like to make the ends of it kind of blobby like that. And here I'm making it rounded. And here a little bit. Actually, I'm gonna do that again. Make that end blobby. And that end a little blobby too. And then finish that up. Okay, there's the E. And then the T, very similarly, I make kind of the ends a little blobby. Make this part rounded. The whole thing kind of wiggly wobbly. There we go. Okay, so now we've got the word wet in this cool blobby outline. I can turn off this layer with the original text now, so I'll just uncheck that. And now we're gonna go through and do the same thing. So I'm gonna create a new layer, and we're gonna do our shadows first. I'm gonna do the light coming from the same direction from here. So my shadows are gonna be on this edge, and then the cast shadow is gonna be this way. So now it's just a matter of going through, and I'm gonna make my brush size bigger. Am I in the right brush? Oh, I'm not even in the right brush, you guys. That's why it was looking a little weird to me. I still think I can make it work. If you're using the wet edge shaper, that's what you should have been doing. I was on the glaze edge shaper, wondering why it looked so weird, but I think I can still make it work. So now I'm in the wet edge shaper. This one I was using is a little harder edge, so there we go. Okay, so I'm just gonna go ahead and add kind of like a shadow. Remember, it's more black close to the edge of this line, and then it kind of fades off. I like that. And then this edge here, I'm kind of layering on strokes to make it darker. So the first pass was a very light stroke, and then I'm layering on more strokes to make it darker. And let's do it here as well. Like that. And now that's pretty good for the W. I'm going to move on to the E. Same thing, because I've got the light coming this way, so that's where the shadow is going to be. Make my brush a little bigger. The bigger your brush is, usually the softer strokes you can make. If it's really small size, it's going to be really hard to make soft strokes. Let's see where else. Maybe here, this edge. So you're kind of just going through and imagining where, you know, where the light might hit. I mean, I could maybe do it here a little bit, but it's really like this edge, so I don't know, maybe not there. I'll come back. How about a little bit here?
I'm sorry, Lisa, which is the brush that we were supposed to be on the time?
Wet Edge Shaper. So I use Stone Wash for the background and Wet Edge Shaper for everything else. Sorry about that confusion. Okay, that's looking pretty good. I'm gonna do the T now. So again, nice and soft, but darker, closer to the edge here. And maybe along this edge. And if you're not sure where to put them, just try it and see how it looks. When you get, once you do it all, you can see how it looks, and it'll be easier for you to figure out, if you're putting it in the right spot or not. And that's also why I like to separate things out onto layers, so I can easily go back and erase this shadow without erasing, the outline. So that's why I like to put on different layers. So, all right, so I think that's looking pretty good. I'm gonna blur this one just a little bit. That one didn't get very, I don't know, didn't look that good. You can take the blur and go in and blur any spots that need to look a little softer on the edge. Just do it by hand like that, if you need to. All right, good. I think it's looking great. I'm gonna go ahead and do the white now. So let me get out of the blur.
As you're doing this, someone asked a cool question. Wouldn't the perspective guide help you see the light rays?
No, that's not really what the perspective guide is for. I mean, you can use lines to be guides. So yeah, not entirely. That's not really what it's for. Okay. All right, so now I'm gonna go ahead and create a new layer, and I'm gonna switch over to white so I can do my highlights. And again, it's easier if I just flip the whole thing around and do it this way. So, and it's okay to cover up some of this outline a little bit, kind of softens it. I'm gonna just go ahead and do this whole edge, but I want it to be more white, like here. A little bit, maybe here, because remember the light is at an angle, so wherever it hits the edge of this drop, it's going to be brightest, if you can imagine that. Art is a lot of imagining, especially when you're not like working from a reference, like really trying to copy what a reference looks like, and you're kind of making it up. You gotta imagine. Being able to see it in your head is like kind of what it's all about. Let me see. Maybe this edge here. I'm gonna make my brush size a little smaller. That's looking pretty good so far. We'll do, in fact, I'm gonna do this edge too a little bit. Kind of opposite to where the black is what you wanna do. Pretty good so far. And now I'm gonna do the W. So around here, I want it to be very densely white. The rest kind of fades off a little bit. And this side. And I'm using really light strokes to kind of do nice and soft. And then coming in with more strokes and layering them on to make it dark, or not darker, but more white, densely white. Darker would not be the right word to use, I suppose. Okay, so that's looking pretty good so far, I think. A good tip, like if you're not sure how something is looking, is just zoom way out, and that'll give you a better impression of if what you're doing is working or not. So I like to zoom way out a lot. Okay, let's do our sharp specular highlights. So I'm gonna go ahead and tap the plus sign to create a new layer. I'm still on white. I'm gonna make my brush size smaller, and then I'm just gonna go in and add just some little shine marks. And here I'm just kind of, I don't know, making it up as I go where I think they might be. If you don't think it looks good, then don't do it there. You know, just kind of play around. Maybe like a really bright one there. Kind of wherever it like bulges out, you know, you'd probably have a highlight there. I'll do two there. Right here on this side. So the highlights essentially are going on top of wherever it's that dark shadow. There we go. Starting to look shiny. And now the last thing is to add that cast shadow. So again, I'm creating a layer underneath all of these other layers. And I'm going to black. I'm using a bigger brush size. We'll start on this side. So wherever the white is kind of where the shadow is going to be coming out. I'm going to do this whole edge very softly. Bigger brush size. And then I want it to be darkest close to the edge here. Let's do this one next. Just kind of going around wherever the white was and adding in some cast shadows. And again, the shadow is being cast by the 3D shape of the droplet itself. So you kind of have to visualize this as like a 3D thing. Maybe here too, actually. Looking good. I'll do here. I'm gonna start here, actually. Layering on strokes to make it darker, closer to the edge of the droplet. And I might actually make these bigger, just a little bit. The longer these shadows are, the taller your droplets will seem. That's kind of how shadows work. And I might actually come in and blur these a little bit. Okay, it's a little messy, but that's okay. I'm gonna go into the adjustments menu, Gaussian blur, pencil, and just kind of blur the edges a little bit. It's a little less messy. When you blur it, you do kind of lose some of the texture of the brush, which is good and bad. I like seeing the brush texture because, I don't know, it's better than just like computer blur, but sometimes you need it. I think that looks good. All right. So that's looking pretty good. I'm not going to worry about those like highlights that come out the side, but I am going to go through my layers and adjust the opacity. I think this one's pretty good at almost full opacity. This is the outline, especially since I did it like accidentally with that really dark brush. I'm gonna like reduce the opacity of it. So you're just kind of going through, reducing the opacity and seeing like where it looks good. I'm gonna go a little, so, and then zooming out really, really helps you see the effect. Like when I zoom out, I can really, it really looks like water droplets. And then what I think really looks really cool with this effect is if you add some more droplets, so just kind of like around. So I'm still on the wet edge shaper. I just created a new layer to like add some, make a smaller brush size, add some like blobby kind of water droplets like that, wherever you want. Just make sure they're not like perfectly round. I don't know where else, maybe we'll do one more over there. And then I'm gonna go through that process really quickly with probably less layers to do these other droplets. So you'll get to see it one last time. So I'm creating one more layer. On all the droplets, I'm just gonna add a little shadow. So this is like the really fast version, little shadow there. A little bit bigger brush size. And then I can also do the cast shadow on the same layer if you want. And these ones as well, little cast shadow. So this, you can see these are a little bit looser, which I like. I think you can sell this effect with really loose strokes. As long as you have the shading right, you can do a lot of styles and make it still look effectively like something that's wet. New layer to do the highlights.
So wait, which layer were we just on though before this?
Yeah, so I created, to do these droplets, I created a new layer for the outlines. I created one more layer for both shadows. And now I'm creating one last layer for both highlights. So again, I'm flipping the whole thing around, adding highlight. And these ones as well. Just adding in the highlight, making sure it's softer on the inside and a little sharper on this edge. Those are just a couple of quick strokes. And then our sharp specular highlight, I'm gonna do it also on the same layer. Awesome. And these guys here on these like little part that's kind of rounded out there gets a highlight. There we go. And now I can zoom out and really see like how wet and shiny and fun that looks. And if you wanted to add some patterns to your background and then use that liquefy effect to kind of bulge them out, you can do that. But I also really like the way it looks just on a nice, simple, washy background. So there is your wet text effect. Do we have any questions about that before we kind of wrap things up?
Did you change the color at all for the first shadow?
I literally only use black and white. So I use blue for the background, and then I use black and white for everything else. And the way that I got my, instead of choosing gray, I just reduced the opacity of the black layers to get it to the right darkness, I guess you would say. It's gonna look a little bit better than if you chose like a dark blue or gray or something like that. Any more questions?
I'm looking for which brush were you using before, someone asked?
So again, I only used 2 brushes for this whole piece. I used Stone Wash for the background, and I used the Wet Edge Shaper for everything else. Wet Edge Shaper.
Someone was saying, I'm sizing my images the size you use and doing CMYK at 300 dpi, but my images still look pixelated.
You might want to check your canvas settings. So if you go here to the wrench icon, canvas information, DPI doesn't really matter if you're sizing in pixels. So 3800 by 2800 pixels. I can print this as big as 12 by 9, it says, but really you could print it bigger than that, but yeah. So I don't know. Hard to say what's going on there. Any more questions?
I do not have any at this time.
See, this little bit is bugging me right here. It kind of covered up too much of the outline. So this is when you get kind of nitpicky. If you want, you know, you can erase it a little bit. Because that outline actually matters. Water naturally, it has the appearance of an outline. It looks darker around the edges. If the outline wasn't there, it still kind of looks wet, but it feels like something is missing. So, oops, I don't know how my blend mode got changed. But anyways. All right. We ready to wrap things up?
We're ready.
Okay. All right. And if you guys have general questions, we will be taking some of those at the end. So I would love to see what you guys made with this. I think there are some really cool possibilities for what you could do with it, what you could write with your text or do other shapes. You could draw pictures in the shape of water droplets, like, you know, you could do hearts or stars or whatever, like symbols. I don't know. There are a lot of possibilities. So I'd love to see what you do with this. So please tag me. You can use the Bardo Brush hashtag. Of course, my Instagram account is Bardo Brush. And I made a special hashtag for this particular tutorial, which is BB Water. So this is great if you want to see what other people did with this tutorial. You can visit that hashtag and see what other people have done with it. And then, of course, I'm also Lisa Bardo on Instagram. But I love seeing your guys' work. It's like the best part of this whole thing. So, yes, please do. And then again, I mentioned it really quickly at the beginning, but I run the Making Art Everyday Challenge, which is a series of daily drawing prompts. We do tutorials such as this one, other resources. I send out a motivational email every week with the week's drawing prompts. And then we have a really awesome community of artists that are following along and doing all the prompts, and they interact with each other and support each other, and it's really great. So you can find more about that at bardobrush.com/join MAE. And now I'm happy to take whatever questions you guys have. We'll do questions for a few minutes before we sign off. So have at it.
Awesome. Well, I just wanted to add, a couple people just said, I love it. I have so much fun following your tutorials. It's therapeutic to just follow directions, have no pressure, and create fun.
Oh, I agree. I'm with you on that. Like sometimes when you just like, it's fun to create things from scratch, but like creating something, following instructions, like from a kit, I have a lot of fun doing that too. Like last summer I made all these like miniatures from kits, and it was very therapeutic and really fun. So I'm with you.
Someone was just saying, I find it hard to find the right pressure to create that dark black to the light black.
So that's a good point to bring up, and it's something that takes practice. Drawing is a skill, and there's lots of skills with it. Like illustration is a skill that is made up of lots of other skills. So knowing how to draw a circle that looks like a circle is a skill, and knowing what the right pressure is to create that shaded effect, I think it's easier. So I'm doing like really light pressure here, even lighter here. You can go light until there's almost no pressure to create something like that. And then you can come back and layer on strokes and do it again. I'm doing really heavy. Like if I do it really heavy, then it'll look like that. So it's a lot about knowing your tools, knowing how to use them. Digital art is just like any other art form. You have to know how to use your tools. They don't do the work for you. Not always. Like they can, you could get a stamp brush that makes a stamp of a leaf, or stuff like that. But you'll get a lot more mileage out of knowing how to manipulate certain tools. So here we go. Like you can see, I've got a nice gradient. I'm just really lightly going in and adding more strokes and adding more strokes, and I can go heavier on this side. So it takes a little bit of practice, and then there are tools that help you, like the blur. So going to Gaussian blur and just kind of painting in this edge, you'll get a really soft effect doing that. But in my opinion, you lose all that like wonderful texture. So if I see, Like this has a lot of texture, which I love. I don't as much love the like super smooth blur. So that's a matter of artistic preference, I think. Nothing, there's no rules. Like you can do it however you want, however looks good to you. So, and when you're zoomed way out, you know, it's hard when you're up close, but yeah, it just takes a little bit of practice.
How do I make it seem more shiny? Do I add more white edges or work on the highlights?
So the real shininess comes from these sharp highlights here. If they're really soft, it's not going to look as shiny. I don't know if I can illustrate that. Like if you do really soft highlights here, it's just going to look very, I don't know, it's going to look very smooth. And if you do really sharp that's going to look shiny. Does that make sense? I can't do like a really soft, like, I mean, imagine that's like a really soft highlight like that. And then this is very sharp. That will make it look more shiny. If that, hopefully that makes sense. But shininess comes from, and I have a tutorial about metallic objects, which might be very helpful to you. The shininess, reflectiveness comes from switching from light to dark, light to dark. Like if you see I put a glass of water here for you guys instead of my normal mug of tea. And you can see like how many, there's tons of highlights and dark, like really sharp highlights and lots of changes from like values from like really bright whites to like gray and in between. And it just changes a lot. Doing water can be difficult, especially like something like a water glass, because there's a lot happening in there. It's not just a smooth surface like, you know, this table or something like that. So yeah, hopefully that helps. Got another question for me?
So I was asking if you can share the color palette for this tutorial.
I don't really have a color palette for this one. I just picked a blue that I like for the background, and it's black and white. So there's not really much to share for that one. And you can make the background any color you want. Like if I change it to, I'm going to go to hue, saturation, brightness. You know, it could be whatever color you want, and it still looks shiny. Water is transparent. So you can, you know, make the background whatever color you want, and then it will show whatever's behind it, if that makes sense. In fact, one really cool thing you can do, which I wasn't going to show you, but I'll show you now, is if you wanted to make the water look colored, all you need to do is color in this. So remember when we wrote the word wet originally, I have that layer. I'm going to put the opacity back up and maybe change it to a different color here. Well, here, instead of that, I'll just draw in it. Let's see, what color? Maybe like a purple or something. So if you go in and you just color this in, it's not going to look like much yet. Bear with me. So I'm just kind of coloring in the water droplet. And then I can maybe reduce the opacity a little bit. I can change the blend mode so that I want to see some transparency. I want to be able to see the texture of the layer underneath it. So you can reduce the opacity, or you can, you know, change the blend mode until it looks right. Something like that. I don't know if multiply would work. Which one? This is experimentation right now. I don't know, linear light kind of works. And now it kind of looks like it's purple water. You probably have to work with it a little bit more. I think this one needs a little bit more shading, but that is something that you can do. I'll do this drop. You can color it in. So yeah, you get the idea of what I'm kind of talking about. Just doing it really roughly. So now it's like somebody spilled purple juice. Purple drank. Okay, anyways. Any more questions, Jeff?
I think we're doing great.
All right, cool. Well, I'll go ahead and wrap up then. Again, my name is Lisa Bardot. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm the owner of Bardot Brush, and I make awesome brushes for Procreate. Lots of different art materials and fun stuff to play with. I really take a lot of pride in my brushes, so if you want to support the work that I do, checking out those brushes is a really good way to support me. And then of course I run Making Art Every Day that I showed you guys about, and that is, if you want to learn how to draw, drawing a lot is a really good way to do it. And I kind of guide you through lots of different subject matters and different techniques and things like that throughout the year. So I definitely recommend joining in. But I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.